Hi, everyone. I wanted to talk to you today about writing. Now, I know sometimes people don't like to write, or they're not sure what to write about, or they think that they have to write what everybody else thinks they should. Well, I want to share a really important story with you today called Arthur Writes a Story. And I'm thinking that you'll get some really helpful tips about writing from Arthur. Let's see what he has to say. This book, by the way, is by Mark Brown. Arthur's teacher, Mr. Ratburn, explained the homework. "What should the story be about?" Arthur asked. "Anything," Mr. Ratburn said. "Write about something that is important to you." That sounds like good advice. Arthur started his story the minute he got home. He knew exactly what he wanted to write about. And here is his writing piece. How I got my puppy Pale. I always wanted a dog, but first I had to prove I was responsible. So I started Arthur's pet business. My mom made me keep all the animals in the basement. It was a lot of work, but it was fun until I thought I lost Perky. But then I found her, and she had 3 puppies, and I got to keep one of them. That's how I got my dog Pale. The end. And look, he even drew a great picture. Arthur read his story to D.W. "That's a boring story," D.W. said. "Does it have to be real life because your life is so dull?" "I don't want to write a boring story," said Arthur. "If it were me," D.W. suggested, "I'd make the story about getting an elephant." The next day, Arthur read his new story to Buster. "Did you like the part about the elephant puppies?" he asked. "It's okay, I guess," said Buster. "I'm writing a cool story about outer space." "Maybe my story should take place on the moon," thought Arthur. On Wednesday, Arthur read his newest story to the brain. "Scientifically speaking, elephants would weigh less on the moon, but wouldn't float that high," said the brain. "So you don't like it?" asked Arthur. "A good story should be well researched," said the brain, "like mine, if I had a pet stegosaurus in the Jurassic period." "What are all those books for?" asked Francine. "Research." Oh, you know what? I'm sorry, I missed a page. Arthur hurried to the library. "What are all those books for?" asked Francine. "Research," said Arthur. "I'm writing about my pet, 5-toed mammal of the genus Loxodona." Your what?" asked Francine. "My elephant," Arthur explained. "Oh," said Francine, "I'm putting jokes in my story." All through dinner, Arthur worried about his story. "Please pass the corn," said Father. "Corn? That's it," said Arthur. "Purple corn and blue elephants on planet Schmelephant. Now that's funny." "Arthur is acting weirder than normal," said D.W. On Thursday, everyone at the Sugar Bowl was talking about their stories. "Last year, a kid wrote a country western song for her story," said Prunella, "and she got an A+. "How do you know?" asked Arthur. "Because that kid was me," explained Prunella. "Mr. Ratburn said I should send it to a record company. It was that good." "Wow," said Arthur. That night, Arthur's imagination went wild. He decided to turn his story into a song, and he even made a dance to go with it. Oh my, look at that. Later, he tried it out on his family. "Now this little boy can go home and enjoy his own personal striped elephant, and you will see how happy he will be here on planet Smelephant." "Well," said Arthur, what do you think? What do you think they thought? They don't look impressed, do they? Mother and Father smiled. It's nice, said Grandma Thora, but a little confusing. Too bad you can't dance, said D.W. What am I going to do? Said Arthur. My story is due tomorrow. That night, Arthur didn't sleep very well. How many of you have ever worried when you had a story to write that maybe yours wasn't good enough? That's what was happening to Arthur. The next day, Arthur worried until Mr. Ratburn finally called on him. When Arthur's song and dance was over, the classroom was quiet. It was almost spooky. Blinky raised his hand. Did that really happen? Sort of, said Arthur. It started as the story of how I got my dog. Oh, I'd like to hear that story, said Mr. Ratburn. Oh, well, the title was How I Got My Puppy Pal, said Arthur. And then Arthur told how proud he was of his pet business and how scared he was when Perky disappeared. And he told how happy he was to find her under his bed and how surprised he was to see her 3 puppies. And the best part, said Arthur, is I got to keep one. Does that story sound familiar? Yes, it sounds a lot more like his first story that he wrote before everybody else gave their opinion, right? Buster said, I like that story better than your other one. Great story, said Binky. I think Arthur's story was the best, said Francine. Good work, said Mr. Ratburn. Of course, I'll expect you to write it all down by Monday. Then Mr. Ratburn gave Arthur a gold sticker. Oh, and one more thing, he said. Leave out the dancing. Arthur's embarrassed about that, isn't he? So, what did Arthur learn about writing? Was it as hard as he thought? If you think about it, he wrote that first story right away as soon as he went home. He was so excited to tell his story. It didn't get complicated until he started to doubt himself. When you're writing, you should be confident about what you have to share. Write your feelings and your thoughts, and I'll bet you will do a great job too. Let's take a look at Arthur's paper. What kinds of things do you notice? He has a title. He used capital letters and he put spaces between all of his words. He used commas and he put periods at the end of all of his sentences. He has a conclusion at the end of his story as well. And he added an illustration that matches the story that he told. Those are all great things that you should include when you write too. Most of all, when you're given a writing assignment, have fun with it, everybody. Enjoy and write what you think is important to share, as long as it matches the criteria you were given as well. Bye, everybody.